In this video, I'd like to talk about how to convert decimals to percents. And we've started with this problem, 0.84. And the question is, how do we change this into some percent? So before we jump into this, remember what the word percent actually means. I talked about it in an earlier video. This literally just means divide by 100. And in a previous video, we looked at starting with a percent and changing it to a fraction or a decimal. So if you had something like 89%, let's say, this is just 89 divided by 100, or 89 hundredths, which is 0.89 or 0.89. So going from a percent to a decimal is fairly straightforward. You just divide it by 100 and then change that fraction to a decimal. And these tend to be fairly simple because division by 100, you just change it to some amount of hundredths, which fit very easily with our decimal system. So going from percents to decimals is fairly straightforward. And notice that you start with a decimal point here, and changing from percent to decimal, you move it to the left twice. You're dividing by 100. So going the other way, changing this back to a percentage, notice that you're moving the decimal to the right twice and making it actually a bigger number. So you might be able to guess that this would be 84% because you can move that decimal place twice to change it to a percent. So that's one way to do it, but the more straightforward way to approach this is to just simply multiply your decimal by 100%. So we have 0.84, and we're going to multiply that by 100%. Now, why would we do this? What is 100%? And so think about that. 100% just literally means 100, and the percent means divide by 100. So 100 divided by 100, which is just 1. So if we multiply by 100%, we're just multiplying by 1. So we're not changing the value here. We're just putting it into a different format. Because by multiplying it by 100%, well, first of all, 0.84 times by 100. That's where we'll move the decimal twice, and you get 84. And then this percent sign just carries along. So this does equal 84%. So this is our general process. Take your decimal, multiply it by 100%, or in other words, multiply it by 1 so that you're not changing the value. But we'll multiply it by this 100% so that we can get the percent symbol in there and correctly change our decimal to the appropriate value. Because once you get here, think about it. 84% literally just means 84 divided by 100, which is 84 hundredths. So when we go back, it still gets back to this decimal that we started with. So we can feel confident that this is in fact the right answer. So let's do a few more problems. Let's say we have 0.08 and we want to change this to a percent. And in all of these problems, you'll just multiply by 100%. And so this will give us the percent sign and correctly change the decimal place. So multiplying by 100, it's going to become a bigger number. So 0.08 times 100, you end up moving the decimal twice, but this just becomes 8. So the decimal goes to the right of 8, but just once to the right. And then the percent sign carries along, so this is just 8%. But again, you want to make sense of it. Think about it in reverse. 8% just means 8 divided by 100, and 8 divided by 100 is the same thing as 8 hundredths. So put our decimal place in, that's the tenths, that's the hundredths, and we have 8 of those hundredths, and then you'll just fill in the 0 because you don't have any tenths. So that's the general process, and you'll just check your work by converting backwards, going from a percent back to a decimal. So we'll keep going on these. Let's do 1.74, and we want to change this to a percent. So we will multiply by 100%. And so in every case, when multiplying by 100, the decimal gets moved twice, and it'll be to the right of the 4. So you just get 174, and then the percent just moves along. So 174%. Now, 100%, remember, is just equal to 1. So 200% would be 2. So 174%, right between 100 and 200, is between 1 and 2, so that does kind of make sense in that regard. But again, if you change it back to a decimal, this just becomes 174 divided by 100. So 174 hundredths. So we put in our hundredths place, and so you'll put the 4 there first, and then the numbers just kind of fill out in order. This will be a 7, and this will be a 1. So you get 1.74, which is what you started with. So you can feel confident that this is the correct answer. So let's do just one more of these. Let's say you have 9.7483, and we want to change that to a percentage. So with all of these, just multiply by that 100%. And so multiplication by 100 moves the decimal twice. And so you get 974 point, and then 83. And then the percentage just carries along. Now, if you want to check this one's a little bit more awkward, but when you do check it, you'll just divide 974.83 over 100. But if we want to rewrite this as decimal, we want to get rid of the decimal up top and just make both of these whole numbers. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 100 to get rid of that. And again, this step is all just checking our work. So by multiplying by 100, we move those decimal places back, more to the right, and then this becomes 10,000 underneath. So we have 97,483 10,000ths. So if I write out all the places, let's put a 0 there, and we will need a ones place. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So this is how many 10,000ths we have. So we're going to put the 3 in the 10,000ths place, and then just fill it out in order. So this is an 8, a 4, a 7, and a 9. So 9.7483, which is what we started with, because the decimal started here. So we can feel very confident that when we convert this to a percentage, that this is in fact the right answer, because we checked it. We converted this percentage back to a decimal, and we got back what we started with.